Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about Nazi policies towards the Jews, mainly from 1933 to 1938, although there weren't any major policies in like 36, 37. It was just like continuing on with the policies that were set up till 1930, 35. I am not going to be talking about Kristallnacht because that is a whole nother video, like the whole events of Kristallnacht, and yeah, that just deserves its own video because like the analysis there is huge. Anyway, let's start. Well, first of all, the first thing the Nazis did against the Jews once they were in power was organize a boycott on Jewish businesses. This was on the 1st of April, 1933, April Fool's, really easy date to remember. And it was a retaliation against this Jewish boycott that had been happening against German-owned businesses. I don't know to what extent this is true, but the Germans justified the boycott saying, well, the Jews did it to us, why shouldn't we do it to them? You know? It was a whole bunch of propaganda was used, and the SA actually marched the Jewish shops and stood on the doors. This was against doctors, teachers, lawyers, everyone, every Jewish business or Jewish person like working in a business, doesn't matter if they were the business owner or not, they were prosecuted against in some sense. And if you were a judge and you were a Jew and you were just hanging about in the courthouse, SA members could come up to you and just strip you of your robes just because. And yeah, that was the first act. This was organized by Goebbels. This was just so Hitler came to power on the 30th of January, so this was just about 2 months after being in power. However, they did face some problems with this Jewish boycott because, first of all, what constitutes a Jewish business? Is it a business owned by a Jew, a business where Jews work, a business that had been owned by a Jew but now is owned by an Aryan? What constitutes a Jewish business? So there was a bit of a gray area where it wasn't really that clear. So if it was for example, if a shop was owned half by a Jew and half by an Aryan, what do they do? Because they can exactly boycott the Aryan side, but they should boycott the Jewish side. So which one was it? It was disapproved of by many Germans. Germans were like, "What are you doing?" The SA members would just like stand at the other door, and people would go up to them and say, "Hey, I'm waiting on something. I need to pick it up, please." And if they didn't move, they just push through. And the SA didn't have any specific orders to actually attack the people, so it was a bit of a so they could attack non-Jews. So like the SA members just stood there being like, "Okay then, okay, yeah, what do we do now?" You would just stay there. And yeah, it was only lasted 1 day. It was called off because this was all Goebbels' organization, and he was told to do so by Hitler, who was just appeasing radicals in the party like Himmler, like Heydrich. And like they said, was really unpopular and too radical. Yeah, they wanted to do this, but they had just gotten into power. They should wait a bit. So it was called off after just 24 hours. And it faced a lot of foreign backlash because like this new guy who just come into office and is already organizing boycotts against a large portion of his population. What the hell is this guy going on about? And Hitler could exactly lose the support of foreign powers, couldn't exactly lose the support of his own people because he needed to form the legal revolution. So in order to pass this legal revolution, he needed support, and this was not the way to do so. So he put a stop to this. Now, the legal revolution and the Jews. I've talked about the legal revolution in a separate video, And I just think it's one of the cleverest things the Nazis ever did. Whenever I talk about how I admire the intelligence and the planning and the cunning behind the Nazi policies and what they did, I always get given really weird looks. I'm not saying that I approve of any of it. I don't. It's just you have to admire how efficiently they did it. They did terrible things, but they did so efficiently and so well. Like, why couldn't they have done this for good? Like, they could have helped so many people using these methods, but they chose it to attack just the Jewish population. Well, yeah. Then came the legal revolution, and apart from securing his own power and securing Germany's, allowing Germany to be more Aryanized and more Nazified, Hitler also wanted to start alienating the Jews. And you'll see how these policies, the first few years, were simply about alienating the Jews rather than actively excluding them from, throwing them out of Germany. That's more 38-40. And then the eradication of the Jews, and that is from 41 onwards. But the legal revolution. Well, first of all, some civil service laws were passed. For example, the infamous 1933 law for the restoration of the professional civil service gave Hitler and the Nazis an excuse to throw Jews out. So if there was a Jew working in the civil service, they could be deemed unprofessional, and just because of the law, they had to take them out. So this was kind of a quick fix to this policy. To this problem, Well, overall, 37,000 Jews emigrated because of this. 37,000. And 1,200 at university had to leave because they couldn't just stay there. And these people, depending on where they fled to, because if they fled to Poland, to Austria, to Czechoslovakia, they were screwed because later on the Nazis would come for them. But also France, but if they were to go to Britain or Spain or the US, they would be kind of safe there because these places didn't face prosecution towards the Jews to the extent of the Holocaust. They faced some, but not massive prosecution. Well, this law got a lot of people out of work and damaged the economic situation of many Jews. On top of this, there was this law called the law of overcrowding of German schools, which basically allowed people to kick out Jewish children because there were too many. So, say there was a classroom, right? And there were 25 chairs, but there were 26 children. And there was a Jew there, but then an Aryan child came and didn't know where to sit. Well, the teacher, because of this law, had an excuse to kick the Jew out of class and just bring the Aryan in, just because of that. Well, of course, you have to keep in mind that this law, both especially the restoration for the professional civil service one, really affected the Jewish population because, after all, 16% of lawyers and 10% of doctors were Jewish. And if they were out of jobs, that was not good for German society. Not just for the Jews, because German society too. Well, of course, this was not without any problems. There's this definition, there's still a problem with the definition of a Jew. What is a Jew? How do you define a Jew? Is it because their parents were Jewish? Because their grandparents were Jewish? Because they're married to a Jew? I don't know. So that's the weird thing. How do you define a Jew? That was a problem Nazis faced. Also, Hindenburg thought, okay, fine, you can do this, okay, yeah. But if there was a Jew that fought in the war, they were exempted from this. They can't be prosecuted. And Hitler's why not? Hindenburg would be they're veterans, they deserve to have a stable income because they fought for our country. by Hitler, like, yeah, but they're Jews. We can't just exclude some Jews and not all of them. We just exclude all of the Jews, veterans or not. But yeah, 97% of teachers joined the NSLB, so it still left some teachers not joining this Nazi association, and some of those teachers could have hidden their Jewish identity. So, like, because it wasn't too obvious that they were Jewish, they could have kind of get away, so they were kind of safe in there. And some Jewish children managed to still receive education, so they weren't exactly forced to join the. Like, there was a school league thingy for the Nazis. It's a whole nother deal. It's about Nazi policies towards young people, and I'll talk about it in a video sometime. Well, these civil service laws, they weren't the most significant ones. Not significant, the only ones. They were significant. And out of the whole legal revolution ones, they were the most significant for the Jews, but it's not just that. For example, lawyers, like the 16% of the German population that were 16% of the German population, 16% of lawyers were Jewish. Let's just leave it at that. Well, these lawyers were gradually excluded from society. For example, word of mouth would spread that they lost every case they had, that they charged so much money because Jews were greedy. So, because of word of mouth and propaganda, they were excluded. And they couldn't exactly do anything about it because they couldn't protest. The courts were now Nazi courts. There were a lot of propaganda, like with the lawyers, but against Jewish doctors, saying that, oh my God, they killed 90% of their patients. Don't go here, don't go there. That obviously would hurt a lot of Jewish doctors, and some were even removed. Remember, 10% of doctors were Jewish. And by May 1933, all Jewish doctors were banned. Imagine you had this doctor that was your family doctor, had been there for 30 years, and suddenly, because of this one law, he was now not allowed to practice. Like, what the hell? You're gonna have to find a new doctor. So that was kind of a bit. Well, a lot of the law against the overcrowding of German schools and universities. It didn't only affect the schools. It affected the number of Jews managing to get an education. So, yeah, some still got through, but there was like a whole generation of Jews who, if they managed to survive like the Holocaust, they would be without education because they were just not allowed to go into the German schools, which, by the way, were one of the best educational systems in the world. But if they weren't allowed in, they couldn't exactly benefit from it. And even if these Jewish children managed to stay in schools, they were still excluded. Like, they were segregated. So, I don't know, you're a teacher, right? And you have this classroom, and there's a dirty seat, like no one sits there. It's an old table and an old chair. It's kind of broken, and there's a bunch of new chairs. And there's 24 of the good tables and chairs, and this one old dusty, really table. And 25 students go into the class. There's one Jew among them, and say the Jew sits down in no good chair, and an Aryan sits down in the bad one. The teacher could 100%, and they did, switch the Jew with the Aryan so that the Jew would be in the bad seat. They would have separate lunch tables. They would have separate everything. They were segregated in school, even from a young age. It would do two things. It would make the Jews feel separated from society, felt like they were outsiders and they didn't belong, and also teach Aryan children that they should exclude these less than human beings. Like, what the hell? They're just children. However, even after this ban, there were also downsides to this because some Jews still managed to operate. But like I said, say you were a doctor who's been with this family for 30 years, well, you're not exactly going to hang out your practice now, even though there's a ban, right? So some doctors still maintain their practices, of course, undercover because they couldn't afford to be caught because they would be sent to concentration camps. Not extermination, just concentration. And so there were still private schools. It's not like there were only public schools. So some private ones would accept the Jews, and there were kind of Jewish schools. So like, you know how nowadays there's Christian schools, where I'm guessing there were Jewish schools, and of course Jews could still receive an education from there. And there was also some press laws that said that any newspapers and any piece of media handled by the Jews should be banned. So Goebbels managed to prevent any Jewish propaganda from going through. There were like still some, but very diluted, and you can exactly tell because it have to be very undercover. So all Jewish media or Jewish-owned media were banned. And if you were a journalist who was Jew, if you wanted to continue practicing journalism, you had to go abroad. You had no other choice. So now the Nuremberg Laws, which I think are the most interesting part of all the whole Nazi policies towards the Jews, because it's just the laws, like official laws against the Jews, especially targeted towards the Jews. Because the legal revolution ones, yeah, they affected the Jews, but they weren't targeted, if you know what I'm saying. Well, when you're in 1995, you're German, you're very anti-Semitic, are you happy with what they had done? They had just did a really bad boycott and some laws excluding some Jews. You're going to want more, right? So you demand even more laws. Then the Communist International, a communist organization, declared a war on Nazism. So Hitler's like, oh, it's like that? It's like that? Well, at this point, Hitler, he was well established in German politics. He was now officially the Führer, and he had like all the power he wanted. So when the Communist International declared war on Nazism, he's like, yeah, it's like that. You want human rights? Of course I'm going to give you human rights. Here you go. Laws against the Jews. Boom. Face it. Hey. And these were passed on the 15th of September 1935. By the way, Nuremberg laws were called like that because they were passed in Nuremberg. And the reason they were passed in Nuremberg was because this was the famous site of the Nazi rallies, the Nuremberg rallies, which, by the way, in the Nuremberg Trials, these were held in Nuremberg on purpose to just signify the end of the regime, which had officially started in Nuremberg. So that's why. Just quick fact. Well, for example, with the Law for the Protection of Law for the Protection of Blood and Honor, which was the first of the Nuremberg Laws, Nazis managed to outlaw marriage between Aryans and non-Aryans, essentially Jews. I mean, these weren't exactly towards the Jews, but these were mainly aimed towards the Jews. These also excluded asocials, gypsies, non-Aryans, essentially. So the aim of this protection of blood and honor was to prevent any sexual relationships that would contaminate the gene pool in Germany. So if a Jew were to have a child with an Aryan, that would mean that there would be a half-breed. No one wants that. And that's not what the Nazis wanted. So they passed this law in an attempt to prevent this. Then the right citizenship law, one of the most interesting ones, like one of the most interesting Nazi laws I've ever seen, said that if you could only be a German citizen if you were not a Jew, and you were not Aryans. However, what constitutes a Jew? And I'm going to get into that in a second. This just shows how now German concern stability was achieved. So that wasn't, you didn't need to worry about that. The main focus now was on the one hand rearmament in secret, and on the other hand anti-Semitism. Now it was the main policy of the Nazi Party. Well, Aryan women were actually pressured to leave their Jewish husbands. They're like, oh, you're married to a Jew. If you want to keep your citizenship, you're going to have to leave him. I'm sorry. And they did. Some women left their husbands, and their husbands left the women just because they were Jewish. Just because. Like, no other reason. And like with these laws, if they were broken, some people were arrested. Some would be released, but then rearrested and then sent to concentration camps. Anyway, back to the Reich citizenship law. There was this first supplementary decree that, of course, once the law was passed, you were like, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't think I'm a Jew. How can I make sure I'm not a Jew? Well, this supplementary decree passed in November of 1935, just 2 months after the law was passed, gives a definition for Jews. So a full Jew was if you had 3 grandparents that were Jewish, or 2 grandparents and a spouse. So if you were married to a Jew and had 2 Jewish grandparents, you were a full Jew. Or if you had 3 Jewish grandparents, you were a full Jew. That's just how it is. And if you were a half Jew, you had 2 grandparents that were Jewish. Could be either side. It could be like mother and mother, father and father, or mother and father. But if you had 2 grandparents that were Jewish, you were half Jew. And if you had just 1 parent, and I think if you had a parent that was a Jew, you were a Jew. I'm not 100% sure. There's a whole chart. If you wanna Google it, just Google Nuremberg Law chart, and there's like a whole image showing the tree, like how Jewish you can be. And these half Jews were named Mischlinge. I probably butchered that, but hey. And yeah, however, there were some negative things with these laws. It was just not complete exclusion from society, because what is Jew? Because these definitions were given up, but how do you prove these? How do you prove that someone had 3 Jewish grandparents? You can't. The grandparents are probably dead, so you can't ask them. And the way they did it was demanding for documents, like official documents. However, on the black market, a lot of fake IDs, fake documents, falsified certificates their sales weren't just up. They skyrocketed. And yeah, that's how people got out of this law. And also, these laws were against Jews. If you were a half Jew, you could kind of get out of these laws. You could kind of live a normal life. If you were a Mischlinge, you could kind of live okay for now. And yeah, that is the Nuremberg Laws. Then last but not least was increasing discrimination. So on the 14th of July 1935, there was this anti-Jewish demonstration in a swimming pool in Heigenbrucken. It's a swimming pool, and people there were fed up with Jews contaminating the pool. Jewish swimmers touching the water, and now the Aryans couldn't swim. So there was this whole law passed in order to prevent, this was this protest passed in order to attempt to pass a law preventing Jews from swimming there, just because they contaminated the water. In some bars and businesses, they had these Jews not allowed, Jews not welcome, or Jews not wanted signs. However, some did only have them because of the Nazis. So if they didn't have these signs, nothing would happen. But if they did, who knows, maybe the SA members would be encouraged to go to that bar. So, for example, say you're one of these bar owners and you're told to put the sign. So you put it, but you still tell people to tell their Jewish friends that they can still go to the bar as long as they keep their Jewish identity hidden. So it was just a matter of, we're gonna pretend we don't accept you guys, but we still do. And that was kind of hard to control. So, because how do you control how do you know what that person's a Jew? Just from looking at them. It's hard. So SA members couldn't really keep tabs on this. Well, like I said, some Jews were told that these signs were for SA officers, so they could just ignore them. Some did because they just didn't agree with these anti-Semitic policies, but others did because they wanted to trick the Jews, so they would let the Jews go in, then call the SA, and then turn the SA on them. Just kind of, it did happen, but just kind of being an asshole. And then things like if you had a spa, a club, you would run some social activity, you would exclude the Jews because it wasn't good to actually include the Jews in your activities because they contaminated it for the Aryans. So if you want to run a successful spa, you can, if you allow Jews. However, if you were a normal German, you would naturally, most people, or a large majority, you would be disgusted by this behavior. You would be embarrassed by how your society had been treating Jews. They're just people, they don't deserve this. And they would face internal self-imposed exile. So some kind of boycott? No. They just excluded themselves from society in protest of the attempts to exclude the Jews from society. And there was this statue called the Mendelssohn statue that wasn't retired. More things towards Jews. Well, Jewish books were burned, including books by Albert Einstein, a really famous Jew. Some of his books were burned. And like I said before, this law for restoration of the professional civil service left a lot of people jobless, eventually homeless, starving. So yeah, this was policies during this period were more not to remove the Jews, but just to alienate them from German society, just push them aside so they're not bothering the Aryans. So yeah, that is pretty much it. It's legal laws passed, except for the boycott, but legal things passed through the Reichstag. There was no Reichstag by this point, but legal acts passed just to exclude these people from society that didn't do anything wrong. They just existed, and people hated them. And to this day, I still don't understand why there's hatred towards the Jews. I just don't understand. But hey, that is pretty much it. You have the boycotts of the Jewish businesses. You have the legal revolution, the Nuremberg Laws, which are not part of the legal revolution. Some people say that they are. They're definitely not, because they're 2 years after. And just general discrimination. this does not count the deportation, emigration, Madagascar plan, or the whole execution of the Jews. This is way before all of these happen. And all of this alienation ultimately culminates in Kristallnacht, but that is a whole nother topic. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Thank you for watching.